perspective. Through this week, we will take advantage of the presence of all speakers to start rethinking time as it is and start developing a new overall policy for time. We started today with this event, and we will complete the week on Sunday. There will be over 20 sessions altogether, 80 speakers, and we have over 400 people registered participants. So thank you. Thank you to everybody who's contributing. Thank you to everybody who's following us. The first event was a wonderful conversation, an opening conversation between Judy Weissman and Carla Noret. We will now have the institutional part, which is important to us because we will be hearing the institutional perspective of the 5 institutions that are contributing and making this time use week possible so that time use can be placed at the center of the agenda. I will now introduce the participants in this opening or launching event. And after I introduce them, I will ask them to briefly tell us what Time Use Week means to them and what perspectives, what prospects they see for time use reform. First, we will hear from Mrs. Ariadna Güell, who is the co-coordinator of the Barcelona Time Use Initiative. Then we will hear from Mrs. Montserrat Ballarín, Vice Chair for Social and Economic Development for the Barcelona Metropolitan area. After her, we will hear Ms. Lluïsa Moret, who is the President the chairing representative of the social cohesion, citizenship and well-being area in the Provincial Council of Barcelona, and who is also a mayor. And then we will have the deputy mayor of Barcelona, who is responsible for the Agenda 2030 for sports and metropolitan and territorial or spatial coordination. Finally, we will hear from Mr. Bernat Soler, who is the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Institutional Relations, as well as transfers of the Government of Catalonia. Thank you very much for taking part in this event. Without further ado, I'll hand the floor to Ariadna Güell. Thank you very much, Marta. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Today is a very important day for members of the Barcelona Time Use Initiative for a Healthy Society because we've been preparing for this all year long. And our hope is to trigger with this week a global conversation so that we talk about time use both domestically and internationally. I would like to seize this opportunity to tell you, first of all, about what the Barcelona Time Use Initiative is, and secondly, why it's important. BTUI, the Barcelona Time Use Initiative, is about continuing the positive experience of the initiative for time use reform in Catalonia. However, this was set up in 2019 in Barcelona in order to move beyond our borders so that time use is placed at the heart of the well-being of citizens. We want to transform initiatives that exist from the local, from at every scale, at every level. We want to be ambitious, but we also want to be modest. And what we want over the next years is to make sure that the debate and practical implementation of time use policies to be expanded in Catalonia and all over the world.
These priorities to be shared by the United Nations and by so many other people so that the proper policies can be approved. So at the end of the day, we want time use policies to become a key element to contribute the well-being of our citizens in Catalonia and all over the globe. And as Marta was saying right at the beginning, We want to do exactly the way we've been doing since this time use reform campaign, with a cross-cutting approach, working with everyone involved and from many different disciplines, so that we can bring together different kinds of knowledge and contexts, researchers, civil society, institutions, and other fields of interest. Now, why is this Time Use Week so important this year, and hopefully the next editions as well? For years now, there have been organizations that have spearheaded the implementation of time use policies. However, this time factor has become a very key element against the current backdrop. Somehow, the COVID crisis has forced us to rethink how we spend our time, how we schedule it, how we organize it. And we believe that time use policies can become fundamental for the economic recovery once we hit this new normal, and also to enjoy a healthier society at large. Just to give you some examples, the COVID crisis has altogether changed our schedule and our timetable. At first, we said that 37% of Europeans have started working remotely from home because of this pandemic. And right now, we're starting to get some data about the scope of such changes and how our habits on our day-to-day basis are changed. On the 27th, at the end of this week, we're going to discuss these results and what they tell us about how we've changed. Also, time use policies will be essential, we believe, for our economic recovery. The situation we're going through is speeding up a lot of changes that have started earlier, obviously, how we conceive our work and how our time should be scheduled and reorganized. So on the 26th, we have a whole session devoted to that, to understand our work-related time uses. And finally, also along the same lines, thinking about the longer term, we have goals as the set of sustainable development goals, as well as the 2030 agenda. They're very ambitious, and we believe that time use policies can also contribute quite a lot. That is why next Wednesday we have a panel discussion on that very issue. We want to offer a space to think and to debate from the different perspectives about time uses and how we can make progress. As Marta was saying, we'll be pleased to hear more than 80 different experts coming from occupational policies, biology, sleep medicine, and so many other fields. But on top of experts, we believe it's very valuable that throughout this week we'll have a chance to discuss these issues and to exchange such ideas with politicians and activists that are working every day to make this a reality. And finally, we also want to emphasize throughout the week the need to have this international exchange, facilitating these ideas in different languages online, so that we can all learn from one another among different cities, regions, and countries. We have organized this Time Use Week based on four main pillars. First, local policies that are the foundation upon which the rest is built. And we'll be speaking about that on Tuesday. Second pillar, international policies, specifically the 2030 agenda and the time use change. We'll be discussing that on Wednesday. There's another segment on working relations in the future and how time plays a role. That'll be Thursday. And then on Friday, we have a whole segment on research and the current knowledge we have about time use. We hope that this Time Use Week, which is the first international edition, the first one we are setting up fully online, can be a positive contribution to the Catalan society and everyone around the globe to promote these changes, and so that we can connect with other ideas to build a new global agenda with time use policies together, and at the end of the day to help to build a society with a better degree of well-being that is more sustainable. So on our behalf, we hope that you can all enjoy this week, and that this is useful to also build a new global agenda for time use policies. Thank you all very much. Thanks, Ariadna. We'll now give the floor to Ms. Montserrat Bellerin. Good afternoon, everyone. Regional Minister, dear MP, Ariadna, Marta, Deputy Mayor, everyone joining us during this discussion, everyone who will be participating during this Time Use Week. I have to say it's an honor for me to be able to partake in this introduction as the Metropolitan Area Authority here in Barcelona. Encompassing an area with 2.5 million people, because it's one of the initial time use actions was led by local governments many years ago. And based on those pioneering experiences, as well as the different document we have all agreed upon, time has gained momentum as part of the public policies debate, thanks to organized civil society that have been spearheading this promotion of time use changes. And this has become more and more important in politics. Time, as I was saying, has become more and more fundamental in public policies, and we have come to an agreement to defend time use policies with all the different governments represented here today involved in such an action. We at the Metropolitan area of Barcelona are much in favor of this commitment, because we believe that the right to time contributes to the well-being of people, and it improve social cohesion in our territory, but also because we believe that time use policies are indispensable for economic recovery, for the fight against inequalities, social, gender-based inequalities, and also the effects of the COVID crisis, and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We're also concerned, against the current backdrop, that the pandemic may worsen this conflict between personal time, work-related time, and care time. It's a conflict that is to be seen on our day-to-day, and it becomes even stronger and more blatant in big cities. That is why it is more important than ever to devote some time to this kind of debates. The changes that we have witnessed in the past few decades and that the COVID crisis has just sped up is a call for public authorities and public representatives to design a different type of social organization that is not based on the division or distribution of tasks between men and women and the public and private sphere. So in this new organization, time has to be seen as a new citizen right, so that we can enjoy life more fully. Together, a couple of weeks ago during the Metropolitan Conference, we insisted on the fundamental role that local governments have played in the past 20 years to advance time use policies. But obviously, this is not enough. Right now, we need to have as many stakeholders as possible joining in this fight. We need to do that from many different viewpoints, from a public lens, social economic alliances, and also democratizing the right to time. Only if everyone is involved and we're all convinced about this will we achieve this change. The Time Use Week for this year, 2020, is our first global stop, one of the first and great opportunities to reflect upon our relationships as men and women, and it's an opportunity to discuss about the political and cultural changes that are needed, and also a great chance to put the people on the center and their right, their freedom to enjoy time. I'm sure that this conference will help us identify where the inequalities are, to enjoy time on an equitable basis, and also to understand how this involves or impinges on our health and our well-being. We want to make headway towards a fair distribution of time with economic growth, better well-being, and the reduction of inequalities, but integrating time and its organization in sustainable development. Out of all these questions that I've raised that are so important to improve everybody's future, we'll be speaking about during this week and during the whole Time Use Week. That's why we have great expectations about the conclusions that you'll be able to draw out of the online sessions throughout the week. So we encourage you to participate actively and from a creative point of view, because it will be very fruitful. Thank you all so very much for devoting your time, and I wish you the very best during this week. Thank you, Monse. We take on the challenge. We will start to build this new agenda. And now we give the floor to Ms. Lluïsa Moret. Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank you on behalf of the provincial government of Barcelona for granting us the opportunity to participate in this seventh time use week. I believe that there's one thing I'd like to start with, and it is to say that it's a privilege to participate in this forum. After these 7 editions, this has become a consolidated milestone. It's a landmark event for everyone. It allows you to exchange information, to learn so much, but also to be able to build strategies together and regarding time management and time use. Also, this year, we have an international perspective for the first time, trying to come closer to other stakeholders that can bring different perspectives from a global point of view, as we were saying. And these links to the 2030 agenda, and also how we manage time and how we think about that, and how sustainable development goals can also be better managed. Be that as it may, during this week, during this so-called time use week, as the provincial government of Barcelona, we want to yet add another element that I'm sure we'll be taking up on during the different panel discussions that we'll be able to follow these days, which is the role of local government. Just like we are understanding that in the international perspective it can also be very valuable, we believe that the local viewpoint can be equally valuable. More than 20 years ago, we said that some municipalities, especially surrounding the city of Barcelona, were pioneers because they were able to set up political and technical infrastructures that were that specialized on time management for the first time, and that promoted new policies based on these new time uses. The Barcelona Provincial Council itself set up a division, a department, and helped many of these municipalities to implement their time use policies. So I believe that during this week, we will come back to that very visible first period of this fight and how important time policies can be. They need to be central in our political agendas. They need to be cross-cutting, as we said. We need to give it a special role in our new policies, especially now during the COVID crisis, because they can have a trickle-down effect on many other policies. That is why time management has to be understood from this double point of view. There are other elements that we believe we should take into consideration when debating public policies regarding time management, which is the gender perspective. It is obviously indispensable for us to clarify that time management from that point of view must be properly managed. Otherwise, we'll continue with the same kind of imbalances between men and women, and the same kind of unfair treatment that we have witnessed for years now. And we would just be reinforcing the kind of gender discrimination, especially the role of women in devoting time to caring about others and how to strike a balance between the work time and the personal time. As I said earlier, we at the provincial government of Barcelona, we will continue to offer our support to the 311 municipalities of our province so that together they can move forward with their local policies, integrating a time lens. As it has been said before, this should serve as a general framework so that we can strike this balance between work time, social time, family time, because it all amounts to citizen right. And if we don't manage this properly, this creates suffering and imbalances and injustice. That is why this is a priority, especially now with the new governmental plan and the new local action plans. There's yet another thing that is quite important, I believe, for this week, and I'm sure that many of you will discuss it. it was brought up as well during the workshop that the president of the metropolitan area mentioned earlier, is that up until recently, the debate we've held about policies, proposals, and time use pacts have unfolded, have been implemented in academic environments, in theoretical environments. Now we need to make this concrete to so that our citizens can understand what it is, so the different social and economic stakeholders understand what it means, because it's an overall commitment, and it should engage all of us in our daily life in cities, especially based on all the economic and social activities that need to be undertaken in our day to day in our cities. So I think that during this week, the different roundtable discussions will speak about that, because this debate is important, obviously, and citizens uh, need to appropriate this fight, and they need to engage and to show their commitment with this transformation, which is a very structural, very deep transformation, because implementing a time use reform is quite a deep structural change of our daily habits in all the different public and private realms, not only individual from an individual point of view, but also from a collective one. So, as I was saying earlier, congratulations, especially our colleagues behind the Time Use Week for this initiative. Congratulations as well for the agenda that you have been able to set up, because as Ariadna and Marta were saying, some of the speakers who will have some time to speak during this week are very renowned, and they are indeed experts in this field. I believe that this time use week will be a great opportunity. It will give us great food for thought, and mostly it will help us make headway and understand that time management is a right of all citizens. It has to be based on public policies, and that this has been true all along, but even more so now. It should be visible when implementing any policy from a public authority. That's it. I wish you great success, and we hopefully we'll be able to enjoy it together. Thank you, Lluïsa. We'll write down those three ideas: the citizen right and the central role it should play in public policies. And I will give the floor to Ms. Laia Bonet from the Barcelona City Council. Laia, the floor is yours. Thank you, Marta. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by being fair, because I remember many months ago when we started speaking about this day, during a meeting, I remember we said how important time use policies were and how we should devote time to thinking about this. So I'd like to begin by thanking the Barcelona Time Use Initiative for making this a reality, for finally being able to hold this week, and having the Barcelona City Council by your side, helping you along, especially during this opening event. For the first time since 2014, we celebrate that we have this international angle for the first time, and I'm sure that this will become a consolidated reality as of next year, and it will become part of the international conference for time use research as well. Obviously, everything I'm saying is based on your initial words as well. I'm not saying anything new. It's something that we all share. We are living through quite some turmoil in our lives. It was very difficult to even picture that we would be going through this when we started organizing this event. Barcelona, just like any other cities in the world, is going through quite a healthcare, social, economic crisis, unprecedented one, and it is focusing on social or is showing social injustice even more.
So this is very good news. It's very good news for us to be holding Time Use Week at this time for a number of reasons, because it's really needed in our current society, because it will place on the public agenda and placed within general policies from local to global. The need to enjoy life that is healthy also in terms of time, despite the present context. As Lluïsa Moret, I think, was saying, the role of cities is crucial in fighting inequality in the context of time use. These inequalities are very tangible. They have a clear component in family life, school life. In employment. We have to reinforce the right to use time and safeguard a healthy use of time. There are a couple of things I would like to share with you. As Ariadna said, it's true that new people have come on board, new people have become aware of the importance of time in our lives and the impact our use of time has on the planet, on life on the planet, and on the goals we pursue collectively when we try to tackle inequality. We try to tackle social and economic crises such as this one with as many tools as we can. More and more of us certainly have become persuaded that we don't just need to talk about this, but actually start to implement concrete policies and specific practices that are scalable and that really have an influence on time use policy. That all of that is absolutely true. But we cannot deny the fact that there is a cultural component here. We cannot assume it to be easier than it really is. I mean, we've been talking about this for years, but how many actual changes have we seen in time use policies around us? Very few, all too few. Is this pandemic exactly the wake-up call that we needed to really become aware of the need to implement, time use policies? I mean, has it really come home thanks to this? Have we come to realize that time use is going needs to be an enshrined right? Well, maybe, but it's not gonna just happen. We'll have to make it happen. We'll have to turn it into a real effective wake-up call that becomes part and parcel of our culture. So, I have 2 warnings to give out here. First, in order to change this from a letter to Santa to something that will actually happen, first of all, we have to be very careful with the digitization process. Digitization has been sped up over the past few months, and it's a very positive thing, but let's just be careful about the way we go about it. And I don't like to talk about things in black and white, and I'm in charge of digital action within the City Council of Barcelona, so believe me when I say that I'm absolutely convinced that we have to be on board with digitization, that we have to speed up the digital transition. But we really need to be keenly aware of the fact that unless we really bring everything to bear to make sure that it's a fair transition, then it won't be. Then it won't be. And new layers of inequality will be created by it unless we address them. It'll be a new cause for inequality and new grounds for inequality. And this is also linked to gender policies, as Louisa herself pointed out as well. What is the gender impact of this whole development? When we're talking about teleworking, uh, uh, telecommuting rather, is the solution, and we've managed to solve the problem. Have we really been telecommuting, or have we just been working from home? Have the way we've been working enabled us to have a better work-life balance or not? And what part of our lives has become most impacted in a negative sense? And so we have to start to think about which groups are more overlooked or more disadvantaged, not only in terms of connectivity, devices, and the know-how to use them, even beyond all of that, who is bearing the brunt of this whole change because they're in charge of the caring work in the family, of of accompanying, supporting others in their family. And so who's giving up certain things, you know, to make this telecommuting happen, which might, on the face of it, seem to be a good thing for better time use. A couple of things that we've done in the city of Barcelona, and I just have a couple of things to share, I'll wind up. Well, we asked our citizens whether they thought telecommuting would become consolidated. 79% of them thought it would be. That's unprecedented. And when they were asked whether they agreed with this happening, 68% did. That was even harder to imagine not that long ago. 68% of the population in favor of telecommuting. Okay, but let's turn this into an opportunity. Let's implement it the right way. Let's therefore turn it into an ideal scenario for the implementation of time use policies that will help to address it. Lastly, one very last thing I would like to say, this will come to pass if we not only pay careful attention to make sure it happens this way, but if we also do it in a cross-cutting way. If we're not cross-cutting in our approach, it won't happen. We can't have good time use policies with sectoral perspectives on reality. We can't have compartmentalized perspectives. And we're not used to working with cross-cutting tools and technologies and perspectives. The only way to have effective change in time use policies, it will be through a multidisciplinary action that is cross-cutting, and that is what takes me to Agenda 2030. I'm very glad you're addressing this from that perspective, because the underlying concept behind all this is sustainability. To be sustainability, we have to be bold in our time use policies. Otherwise, we'll be creating customs and habits and lifestyles that will not be sustainable from an environmental, social, or economic perspective. So, this is what we're trying to drive forward in the city of Barcelona, the City Council of Barcelona. I'm sure all the institutions represented here will be joining us in this on this journey. And I'm sure that the Time Use Week this week will help us define and muscle up very bold and realistic and effective policies on time use. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laia. So, yes, indeed. I mean, we have this is the way we have to do it sustainably. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Bernat Soler, who is the Catalan Minister for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much, Marta. But even though we don't have much time, I would like to devote part of my time to greet all the representatives of the other institutions at this event, precisely because of the institutional and social consensus that we've reached to place time use at the heart of welfare and growth policies. We won't be able to place time use at the center without such a consensus. So I would like to welcome Mrs. Laia Bonet, Deputy Mayor of Barcelona, Mrs. Lluïsa Moret, the Chair of Deputies of the Provincial Council of Barcelona, Mrs. Monteballarin, Vice Chair of the Metropolitan Area of Barcelona, and Ms. Ariadna Güell and Ms. Judith Carrera, who are co-coordinators of the Barcelona Time Use Initiative for a Healthy Society. Clearly, time is a strategic resource, and often we're not quite aware of that. Not only that, it is also a finite, non-renewable resource. During this pandemic, this has become even more patently so. The pandemic accelerated uh, the situation even further. The way we act has changed. The way we do things has changed. When we were preparing this week, we had some uncertainty as to what this week would be like. Everything is liquid, everything is fluctuating. Well, that should also lead us to choose more rational and healthy living hours. The pandemic has really tested our ability to adapt and adjust. And so we could, we could ask who thought 1 year ago that getting home early might be a good way to tackle a health crisis. So we've had to change certain habits that everybody assumed were immutable. We've also had to reprioritize our values. Certain things that we used to consider essential have become less so. So institutions of governance need to help ensure that some of these changes that are provisional for now until the pandemic become a permanent. And it's our responsibility to spearhead this change. Our institutions need to be open to new ways of working and new ways of organizing ourselves. In the case of local councils, it's been very clear. The accelerated digitization process has made it possible for most town councils in Catalonia, if not all, to be working remotely thanks to or because of the situation. And these changes have had to be made in a country where we still have very long lunch breaks, very rigid working hours, and TV programs that end very late at night. So here there is a shared responsibility. As Laia pointed out, there's a cultural element that we cannot ignore. The need for change has to be brought into a culture that requires us to work long hours. So this is a continuation of the time use reform initiative that led us to set up a specific body within the government of Catalonia. So we're going to make this more effective and we're going to make it happen as soon as possible. The point is we want to leave this as a legacy. The Council for Sustainable Development pointed out to us in its report that better time management improves quality of life. Good time management is synonymous with good quality of life. And so what we see is that we've done very good perspective research, very good job there, but we have yet to implement it fully. Time management has become part of the policies of many governments in the world, including local governments as well, or at least it's awakening much interest. Between 1986 and 2015, 95 states promoted surveys on time use, including Catalonia. Uses of time are essential to assess quality of life, the balance of work between, the gender balance of work, and many other things. And the time factor is also a structuring component to the Sustainable Development Goals mentioned earlier, which are part of our construction of Catalonia the way we want it. It's also a cross-cutting part of the Agenda 2030. Inefficient use of time leads to a lot of impacts. For instance, uh, in terms of having decent work or other things, it's a conditioning factor in terms of having good health also. Or also the time we would like to allocate to co-education with our children is also impacted by poor time use. Lastly, our consumption and production model, which is so accelerated, creates surpluses, excessive mobility. This demand for immediate delivery, is leading to waste of resources with the consequent pollution, with the ensuing pollution. Time use is also linked to gender imbalances. According to IDESCAT, women devote 3 hours and 54 minutes to family work compared, or household work, compared to half as much devoted by men. And under the pandemic, women have had to devote even more time to the care of vulnerable people and people who are ill. So a double impact of gender imbalance. Time use also has to do with social inequality because part of the population has to work far longer hours and keep several jobs in order to have a minimum income. Laia Bonet mentioned earlier that the new digitization process has to be enabled to happen in a way that leaves no one behind. We all need to get there on an equal footing. Finally, I would like the Time Use Week to lead to conclusions which you can send to us so that we and the government of Catalonia can work on them together with all sectors in society, because we absolutely need a more rational use and allocation of time. We need to work to have better organized time, more time for family, for activities, for friends, for leisure, more time for culture, more time to share in the responsibility of governing this country. We measure time in terms of what we do and what we experience. Because we want more quality time, we hope that this week will be very fruitful and that your considerations will help awaken people in institutions and make all sorts of things happen. Thank you very much, Minister. I would like to thank all of the participants. And so, without further ado, after hearing you all, this is the official start of the Time Use Week with all of these points and recommendations that you've made to us towards our contributing to make time use citizens' right. The following session is about time use legislative measures adopted under the COVID or during the COVID pandemic, and and whether some of them are only provisional or whether they're here to stay. And as I pointed out yesterday, tomorrow we will be focusing on the role of municipalities, of local councils. Of course, many of you have mentioned the role of local councils when you've spoken. On Wednesday, we'll be talking about the SDGs and the dilemma of switching to permanent standard time. On Thursday, we'll still be talking about time use policies and labor. And then on Friday, we'll continue talking, and then we will have a closing event. Thank you very much for following us. Thank you very much, Ms. Montserrat Ballarín, Ms. Lluïsa Moret, Ms. Laia Bonet, and Minister Bernat Solé for joining us.